And I'm always amazed when I take students to Paris, and then they turn around at me and they say, "Look, the Eiffel Tower." And I think, have you never seen that before?
So, Anne, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. And first of all, I'd like to ask you, how did you start studying Buddhism? What led you to that?
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ibrahim, for having me. And yes, that's a very good question, actually. Why Buddhism? I think I was attracted by India first, because I've seen pictures when I was 14 years old in a magazine, and actually there were elephants. And I was attracted by people doing other things that I didn't understand, and I really like people. So, but I still started to study Italian and French, which was always my passion. I wanted to study in Italy, I'd been there before, so I did that first. But then I thought, well, languages were interesting, maybe Marco Polo, because Marco Polo connects the world, you know, the European world, to the Indian world, to the Chinese world, to the Mongolian world. I thought that would be a nice topic. But the potential supervisor said at that time, everything has been written. Then I thought, okay, maybe I should go deeper into it. And at Ghent University, there was a possibility to combine Indian languages with Chinese languages, and then to see the movement, a bit like Marco Polo, to see the movement around in Asia. And automatically, since Buddhism or Buddhist groups are moving all around the world, I entered into the Buddhist world, and I've stayed there.
And so you went to University at Ghent?
I went to University of Ghent for the study of Buddhism, yes.
And then you're teaching there now?
And I'm teaching there now. I'm really local. Yes, well, I'm a certain age, I can say that, I think. And in Europe, to find a job 20, 30 years ago, there was a lot of language restrictions. So it was not so easy to move around. Italy might have been an option, maybe France, because I'm fluent in French and Italian, but it's not that it was open to everyone. You had to do language exams, a lot of systems. So basically, when there was a job opening in Ghent, I applied for it. It was Buddhism, and I thought, yes, I will try and I will do it. And they said yes to me, and I'm still there, happily to be there, actually. I'm still happy, yeah.
And so when you studied in Ghent, after that, did you go anywhere else?
Yes, I have been in Italy again. Actually, I worked together in Naples with Professor Forte for some time, but that was intensive teaching for 6 years. And I've traveled around to many universities. I had a research position in Ghent, actually, but this was a very free research position, so I could go to many, many places. But mostly I went to Italy to teach at the University of Naples until 2006. And then things changed because Professor Forte passed away, but also my position was tenured by that time in Ghent, and I got more and more obligations in Ghent, so I have become a little bit more local. And also another thing that changed a lot was the fact that we could go to China in a much, let's say, much more accessible way than before. Because before you had to go first to Bangkok or Indonesia and then fly to China. You could not fly over the Soviet Union, so it was always a little bit more difficult. It was not so much funding. And then from 2000, 2005 on, there was much more funding to go to China. So I shifted a little bit my international experience, and I stayed for longer periods in China then, so, and less in Europe. Yeah.
When did you start studying Chinese?
In 88, precisely.
Wow. And did you go to China then?
Yes, but that was 88, 89. And of course everyone knows what happened in 89. So we had to go back. To Europe. And we could not return to China very easily the first years. Of course, it was not a very long period, but when you're just student in these years, it was not such an easy period, actually. But I still liked it. I liked to see what happened in the world. 89 was a fabulous change in the world, actually. Everything changed, or at least that was the feeling we had. You could travel more freely in Europe. In China, there was a lot of turmoil. So I was intrigued by the world, and yeah, it made me even more resilient to understand what happened in China. So yes, I did not give up. I continued, and we were not many to continue at that time. But I continued, and I focused again on Buddhism and everything, all the connections in the world, and I'm happy I did.
And back then, the study of Buddhism in China wasn't as common as it is now, right? Wasn't as popular.
No.
So how did it feel that you were doing something?
I was studying especially language at the time in China. I didn't say I was interested in Buddhism. We went, of course, with some Italian again and some Russian archaeologists, actually. We went around in Liaoning Tashi, with Liaoning Tashi people, so in Liaoning province, to check out a few archaeological findings related to history, but also related to Buddhism. It was really the first time that they opened again to this kind of archaeological research. It was very at the start. And people were asking us a lot of questions because they were not trained in it, obviously not. So the Chinese people were not trained in it. So it was a time that you could get away with not a lot of knowledge and still had a role to play. This is completely different now, happily so, to see what happened in China in the meantime, and now you really can, like we did today actually at the workshop, you really can interact and you can share ideas. At that time, people would ask me, what is Guanyin, what is this figure, how does it work? You know, they didn't have a clue, many people, but this is completely different now. The world has changed.
And what generated this change? What happened?
In China, oh, that's a big question. I mean, you could ask many people who work on sociology or in politics. But on educational level, I think the idea that you have to train people, the urge for knowledge of their own region, but also technological knowledge. So an enormous investment in education. Really an enormous investment, and also in humanities. So also the idea we need to know what happened here, sometimes for political reasons, to understand the world, to know the position of China, but by doing that they opened up an enormous amount of data, archaeological data, manuscripts and so on, and people got interested in it. So that's certainly a big change. Educational level has gone up in very quickly. Yes.
And so now that there is a lot of knowledge about this and the field is moving forward very quickly, how is it that you think Western scholars can remain relevant, so to speak?
Yes.
What do you think about that?
Well, we talked about it a little bit before, and for me I'm struggling a little bit with that. But that does not mean that colleagues who solely work on China and don't work on contact cultures have no relevance. I think there are two things at play. First of all, if you want to understand the world, we should communicate. And you cannot communicate without reading the language, without reading the data and have discussions about it. So even if you're not Chinese, to have relevant discussions and to have insights, I think you need to know what's going on in China to a high level and then communicate with the people and see if you can bring something. I think that's always relevant, and I always very much appreciate Chinese scholars, but also other Asian scholars, Korea, Japan, when they come to our university and study, for instance, art in Flanders and bring their ideas. That's the same kind of working together. I really appreciate that. For myself, I feel more confident when I speak about migration of ideas and migration of material culture, because I always liked it. And I always like to tell people that the world is a contact world. So then I feel I'm joyful and I feel I have more relevance in the global world. But I think both aspects are as important. So yes, of course, we should continue to communicate and to learn about each other.
Okay. And as someone who works in a European university, which is not an English-speaking university, do you also publish in other languages other than English and Chinese?
Today, no. Today, everything is the Dutch language, which we use for the bachelor degree, especially in Belgium, is not the language you're going to publish in for a large academic public. I mean, not many people could read it. Of course, sometimes I do publish opinion papers or smaller papers or a little booklet in Dutch, which then is usually a summary of what I've been doing in English. So that's what we do, yeah. At master level, we do have a research master, which is in English and Chinese. So there we have an international master. But at bachelor level, it's in Dutch. And of course, you need to prepare your material, your Dutch material. I'm teaching classical Chinese in Dutch the first 2 years. So this is, of course, very important. Buddhist Chinese is only in the master level. But classical Chinese, the real classic, let's say up to Mengzi, we teach in Dutch. And of course, you need to have the vocabulary. You need to prepare the syllabus in Dutch. And I think that's really something we need to do. We have to speak to the local community too. You can't just say, I'm in my ivory tower and that's it. And I really like to discuss with my students at bachelor level, undergraduate level too. For me, it's a real pleasure to have people of 18-year-old who come to you and want to learn, and then speak Dutch with them about China, of course, yeah. But when they go then to the master, they have to read English literature, sometimes French, but they don't really like French that much. It's much more difficult for them. For the youth today, it's much more difficult to learn French as opposed to English. I think everything they see, the media, it's all in English. So for them, it's much more natural to go into English than to French. But every now and then I tease them a bit. And I say, Brussels is not far away. Paris, Musée Guimet, we go there. And you will have someone guiding you. And it will be in French. So I think we need to continuously do that. But obviously they prefer English. So.
Okay. And so you mentioned the Musée Guimet. Mm-hmm. So these museums, like the British Museum, the Musée Guimet, how much are these part of your research? And the libraries?
Well, the libraries today, of course, are very much online. You have access to everything. When I was younger, I had to travel a lot, make copies and so on. But today, the system of having everything online or interlibrary loan is so easy. You get it so quickly. If I ask for a scan, for instance, at the university in the morning, we don't have the book, I ask for a chapter. In the afternoon, I often have it. And it's coming from all kinds of libraries in Europe. So this kind of traveling to libraries is not so much needed anymore, to the extent, I think, that some universities, luckily not ours for the time being, are thinking of closing down the physical space for the library and turning it completely into an online library. You save space and so on. I still like the library. I like to walk around. We have a nice library, so I hope they keep it. But it's something that is changing. Other things is, of course, the objects, statues, the real statues. So I bring my students to Musée Guimet mostly now. We do have quite many students especially from China, coming. And well, I don't know if can I say the B word, but since Brexit, it's much more difficult because to have access to London for non-European citizens, they need an extra visa. We need a passport. Some people, when you're 18 or 19 years old, they don't have the passport yet. It's also much more expensive. I'm telling you why I'm not coming to the British Library or British Museum anymore with my students, which I used to do. But the Eurostar is much more expensive than it used to be. It is just not affordable anymore for many students, money-wise, but then also for visa issues. So that's why Musée Guimet has now become the main museum we go to. And the museum in Brussels. And we try to work with objects and I'm always amazed when I take students to Paris, and then they turn around at Musée Guimet and they say, "Look, the Eiffel Tower! And I think, have you never seen that before? We are so used to go there and to work with people in Paris that I'm always amazed when you have someone who's 18 years old, you know, and gets out and sees the museum and how they admire this. And I think, oh wow, this is so good to bring people out of their cocoon and bring them to different places. And I regret actually that we had to skip, for now at least, the British Museum. Because it's just, it's not affordable anymore, and that's a pity. I want it to be affordable for all students.
Yes,
I don't say that some students, of course, can pay for it, but I really want it to be affordable for all students who come to study. And as you know, in Belgium, we don't have these high fees and so on, so we do get a quite large portion of the public coming to us. And then you can't make it too expensive for a trip. That's not possible.
Mm-hmm. What you're saying is that it's becoming more difficult actually to go to London and maybe even to Paris, but that means that there was a period when it was quite easy and it was affordable,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
So that was like
every
10 years ago or something.
Yes, absolutely. For personal reasons, one year I focused on the Musée Guimet, which is still very easy to go. That's because you can go to Lille from Ghent, a direct train, and then half an hour with the TGV, and you're in Paris. It's not even expensive. And the Musée Guimet is for free, but it's also for the British Museum, and so it's very affordable, very accessible, no problem at all. But for my personal reasons, I went 1 year to Paris and 1 year to London just to make it, to give myself a little bit of energy, because otherwise it's repetitive, which it is a little bit now, because you go every year with undergraduate students and undergraduate students, you need to give them the basics. So when you go to Musée Guimet, it's basically always the same. The collection rarely changes. So for me, after so many years, this basic introduction to the museum is not as exciting again as exciting as it used to be. So we changed a little bit. But now when we see the difference of the price and also the difficulties of getting a visa and so on, and the fact that you need a passport, it's just, it's just not doable anymore.
So this Brexit really
Yes, it was the final cut. It was always more difficult to go to London, more expensive. But Brexit has changed a lot. I don't know if everything is due to Brexit, but for instance, the prices of Eurostar have gone up a lot too.
Yeah.
So,
That's a shame. Okay. And what about China or Japan? So I guess because of the pandemic, we were not able to go, but what about now?
Yes, we were not able to go, but we had a very good online program. So for language program, the online classes were really well done. And now we go. There are a lot of scholarships given by our university to go to China, so to help the students to go there. And the whole Bachelor 2, so our second year of undergraduates, they are now in their Bachelor 3 and they're all there. Mm-hmm. So they enjoy it a lot. I don't know if they will, they will probably not finish their Bachelor paper, but at least they will have their semester. We have one semester in Bachelor 3, which they do at Liaoning Tashi. We take them to a town that is not Beijing or Shanghai to avoid them to enter immediately into the international bubble. So, and they're very happy in Shenyang. And in the master, everyone is gone to Asia too. To Taiwan though, because they were too late to apply for funding for mainland China. Because mainland China was still closed in the first semester, as we might remember, and so we were not sure that it would be possible for them to go. So they could not apply for funding. But for next year on, they will go to all kinds of universities again. So yes, that's I'm looking forward to that. And we also receive many students from Asia. In our group, PhD and master students, and they actually have always had the opportunity to come. We were lucky to have been able to always welcome students from China, even during the pandemic time. So yes, sometimes they had to stay online just like the other students, but we never had to stop actually. So for them it was a little bit more problematic, because once they arrive in Ghent, they were stuck for 2 years, some of them. They did not know that, of course. Everyone thought that it would be shorter. So they arrived in Ghent for 1 or 2 semesters, and then they were stuck for 2 years.
Yeah.
It was fine because they had nice studies to do, but it was not fine because they could not see their friends and their family. So it was a little bit of an uncertainty. And of course, once China opened its borders again, whoops, everyone quickly buy a ticket. But luckily for them, the Chinese government has given them quite a lot of help to buy cheaper tickets, because otherwise they would have gone bankrupt with the tickets 6 months ago. So yeah, but they were helped by the Chinese authorities to have cheaper tickets. That was good. That was good.
Yeah, it's wonderful that it's kind of over now.
Yes.
So we can travel.
Absolutely.
At this conference, a workshop we just had, we had Chinese scholars also coming in from China.
Yeah.
So it was very, very good.
It's very good, especially to see the young scholars, because usually it takes some time before you have access to the Chinese research results, because they first need to be published, they need to reach you. But when you see young people who are still working on their material, you really know what's going on, and you have much more easy access and easy communication. So no, this is a really wonderful workshop. I really liked it. Yes.
So on this idea of like seeing and interacting with younger scholars, in your work as an academic, what do you place at the front? Is it research or is it education, teaching? Which one is more important?
They're both important.
Okay.
Really don't make a difference. I think you have to be a good researcher to be a good teacher, and to be a good teacher at university level at least, you need to be a good researcher. So I try to combine. The more difficult is the bulk of the work as an administrator. That can take a lot of work. But I think it's also important. That's my personal opinion. I'm now the head of the department of all non-Western languages and cultures at the university. It takes a lot of my energy and time. But I think we are at a very interesting time again in the world, where we need to find a way to make culture accessible without a lot of political criticism around it. Culture is always important, so that people continue to communicate. In the department of it's non-Western languages, actually languages and cultures it's called. We have the whole world nearly, well not all world, the whole world that you can learn about in Belgium. But that means a lot of African culture, Russia, Ukraine, the Balkan countries, Korea, Japan, India, China, that's the most important ones. Also a little bit of Mesopotamia. So you meet a lot of people from a lot of different areas, backgrounds, and you have to find a way to professionally work with each other, to keep all the tensions out, and to focus on communication, research and educational communication. And that's why I like to do the administration too, to make that possible for a lot of people, and to find a way to find your place in university, and to continually find your way in university, and to make sure there's enough funding for these topics and so on. It's sometimes quite stressful, but it's part of what I see as education, to make this possible. Of course, you're not alone if you're the head of the department, but to really fight for it, and to have a group around you that says, and we have to do this. After 4 or 8 years, someone else takes over, but I think this is really important. Otherwise, you fade away. And this is a danger, I think, in modern times, that the world fades away and becomes something like, okay, we travel, but that's it. So,
yeah. And so thinking about your research, how is your research today different, say, from when you started out?
Yeah, that's a very good question again, thank you. It's different that, because I'm getting a little bit older, and that means that the situation is more stable, I feel, might be wrong, but I feel I have more freedom in choosing my own topics. And so I can study what some people might find irrelevant. But I do that now. I choose those things that make me feel joyful, that give me some smile. So, I study on the toothbrush, or I study on the ants or the insects, on baiting, on oxen. That's already a little, for me, it's already a quite large topic, because oxen is agriculture. But I try to find those topics that I think in human life are important, but are not spoken about a lot. And that's something that's completely different from when I started, because when I started with research on monasticism for nuns. And of course, in the 90s, this was the start of the gender studies. So you were much more in a mainstream field, which was nice. I mean, I always liked to do that. It's not that, but it was a more safer choice of topics. While now, for instance, I don't know if. At the 90s, I probably would never have dared to write, for instance, on sport. The book is now out with Esther Bianchi and Daniela Campo. They have a book on Vinaya, and I wrote together with Jutsu Lung, wrote 2 articles on sport activities. In Buddhism, what does it mean to do sports for a monastic life? And I'm not so sure that 30 years ago, people would have considered this to be a topic that is worth of giving money to, and certainly not an academic career, to build an academic career on that. So that has changed a lot. What is possible now and what was not possible 30 years ago is, of course, database research. Yeah. I mean, we hardly had computers. So it was not possible to look for keywords and to see the text in a completely different way. Now I can put mosquito in a database and see what comes out. At that time, you had these books, and you would hope to find the term in it, but mosquito would not be among the terms. So there was no way you could find what I like to find, mainly where are the mosquitoes. It was not possible. So the work I'm doing now, 30 years ago, was also not possible. Looking for small little things in the texts was not possible. And we discussed today also that the IDP is wonderful also, because the accessibility of the manuscripts, the Dunhuang manuscripts, that's amazing. That was not there 30 years ago, and you could only hope that some people who had access to them, who read them, sometimes even in their offices, behind the key, would tell you about the manuscript where you could find something in. So it would take you much more time to find something, or even you would never find it. While today, so many manuscripts are digitalized that basically it makes it more accessible. And I'm sure that in 30 years they will even become more accessible, because now you still have the difficulties that you're not searchable. But I'm sure that in 30 years, all these documents will become searchable, and then it will even be more. There will even be more access to data, I think. So, yeah, this also changed a lot.
Yeah, I think just by having access to them as images, our research has progressed quite a bit. Yes. I think. So rather than just relying on somebody's transcription and believing it, right? Yes. You can look at the originals.
That's true, but you could do that also 30 years ago. Huh? I mean, I've traveled to Paris and to London, and in London you get these microfilms, which then arrived at your office, and then you had to. But yes, I saw the original manuscripts at that time too. Yeah. So that's not so different. Maybe that even today we don't see the original manuscripts anymore. You might see them, and many of my students.
No, but I mean, digitally.
Yes, they digitally, but they don't see. They don't see the paper anymore. That's so true. And when I have a student who for the first time sees even the Taisho volume, comes into my office, because I have a Taisho volume in my office, and I say, look, that's the Taisho. They say, wow. So they don't have this materiality in their heads, which we had to look for, we had to travel, but at least we saw some manuscripts, we know what they look like. Now they have the image, that's right, and that's of course a lot of access, but I still think they should really have, they should see it. Yeah. And I see this also when I bring the students to Musée Guimet, for instance. When you bring them into contact with the real object you can touch, their interest is raising. It's like, oh, it's real. It's real. It's a real thing. That's quite interesting to see there, because we're used to these real things, but they're not. They live in a digital world now. And then when they see for the first time a manuscript or even a statue, they are amazed by it. They're really looking at it, and they can turn around and then I think, wow, you see, it's still needed to bring them to the real object and to raise their interest, because this is not just a digital world. This is, people made this.
Exactly.
It's work of people. I see. And
so when working on textual material, how important do you think this materiality of the text is?
For me, for my work, it's less important. For other people, it's of course is a lot. To date them, to know where it's done. But what is important for me is to know it's work by people. People did this. So in that sense, materiality is important. But I'm not really working on the materiality of the manuscript. So my colleague Christoph Anderl does that, and he attaches a lot of importance to the material itself, and I think he's right. What I focus on, but we work together, of course, it's to always think people did this. It doesn't, I have to say, it doesn't grow on a tree. It is people's work. People copied, people wrote, people made the paintings. It's human work. And for that, in that sense, it's very important, yes. And so you have to know, if you see, you have access to a library. For instance, I discussed in the paper yesterday that Dunhuang had access to a library. Then try to imagine how such a library must have looked like in the 7th century. So just try to figure out. So I like to try to reconstruct as far as we can the materiality that people had access to. Not only of manuscripts, of a library, but also just their lives. The life in town. I really liked the thesis, of course, of Flavia on smell, and to see how closely you can understand what smell means in human life. So I want to understand people. It always has been my main motivation, is understanding people.
People rather than text.
Yes, I focus on people rather than text, but of course we have the text to get close to the people.
And we don't have the people.
And we don't have the people. So we have the text, we have objects, we have murals, we have what people left behind. So in that sense, yes, I focus on text to get closer to the people. It's a tool for me, yes, that's right.
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
It was a pleasure.
Wonderful. Yes. It was very good to see you here in Cambridge.
Yes, I always loved Cambridge, even during a heat wave. Yes. But thank you very much for having me, Imre. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.